Aloha! Welcome to the Neutral Zone. I'm your host, Jason Schwartz. We're here in Maui. You can find us at MauiNeutralZone.com. You can find us at KAKU 88.5 FM, the voice of Maui. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us if you look. I have a great guest today. I know her as an old friend. I haven't seen her in a while, but if you've been watching shows from me since, 1993 or 4, then you have seen this guest before because this is her fifth, she reminded me, the fifth time we've done this. Sheila Cole, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here again.
And the Neutral Zone is a new incarnation. I like to call it the Neutral Zone, subtitled, It's Anything But Neutral. It's a zone where we can talk about anything, anywhere. And if you're in this zone, no one's coming at you with a sword. And the only reason I think that's appropriate is the show came out of the fact that I was going to interview political candidates like I've done for 16 elections. Can you imagine that? 32 years?
Wow.
16 elections. But I thought that by doing values, we'd have a lot more fun. And that's what the Neutral Zone has been. And we've had all kinds of guests. And I'm in actually 127 or 8 shows in this round. But you haven't been on. It's only been a couple of years, since 2018. The last time we spoke, I would introduce you probably the same as this, except now your credentials are even longer. You are an environment and health educator. Would I call that?
Yes, educator.
You're in Canada. And when I looked at your website, SheilaCole.com, you are a proficient speaker at conferences. And you're rubbing shoulders with, if I was in Canada, I'd be saying, that's the prime minister. That's the head of this. Look at that. Oh my goodness, at that conference. So you've been up there rubbing shoulders, but I knew you were on here in Maui and you were jumping in the beach. So and even then you were an environment, we were talking about environment here. And I know you probably talk about environment everywhere, but the word environment, you know, they say sometimes the same word means two things. When I hear the word environment, I often think of the trees, the soil, the sky, too much of this, too much of that. But then environment also means where you are. Inside this room is an environment.
Yes.
And that's when I think of you as that, someone who is aware that in this area, there are pollutants that are adding or subtracting to my life experience rather than the big environment. I don't mean to diminish I'm kind of focusing our audience to understand where I am taking. Would you say that's true? What would you say?
Oh, I would absolutely say that's true. And even inside our bodies is an environment as well. You know, our whole planet is made up of ecosystems that we're coming to understand more and more, and the interlocking of ecosystems. Well, we also have, ecosystems inside our body that interlock, and we've come to view health in terms of more holistic approaches, where we look at how all of the various systems work together. And so if you have an imbalance in your heart or your lungs or something like that, or, something going on with your kidneys, maybe you don't have to go in and cut something out. Maybe you can look at the whole system of the body and work things out in a much broader way.
How would you introduce you?
I would say, well, I usually call myself an environment and health expert, and I'm an award-winning environmentalist. And so I've worked on just about every environmental issue you can think of, from wilderness preservation, atmospheric and energy questions, marine issues, even mining and climate change kind of incorporates all of those things. I became more also riveted on environment and health back in 1990 when I was asked by Henson College at Dalhousie University here in Halifax to put together a course about my knowledge, which I called Our Environment, Our Health. And at the time, I was doing a lot of other environmental work as well. For instance, I was one of the founders of the Wilderness Committee at the Ecology Action Center, one of our large organizations here in Halifax. It's still one of their strongest committees. And within this structure of the people that I had working with me on the committee, I would be talking about wilderness in terms of health. And one of the other people who was on, who was a marine biologist, would say to me, "Sheila, why are you always talking about health? We're talking about wilderness preservation here." Meanwhile, I'm looking ahead and, at the function of the forests and all of the healthful benefits that forests bring to us, from production of oxygen to holding root systems together, to purifying water, to creating habitat for insects and beasties and all kinds of things that live in the forest. But just before we finish on the environment and health, the intro part there. So after many years of doing public speaking and workshops and all that kind of thing on environment and health, I was also carrying the information forward to the Nova Scotia Environmental Network. So all of the groups that we worked with here in Nova Scotia, and then the Canadian Environmental Network. And in 2007, my colleagues surprised me by creating an award in my name. It's called the Cole Award for Excellence in Environment and Health.
Oh, nice.
So that was kind of nice. And then more recently, I was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award and also recognized in the legislature here.
So
yeah.
My introduction originally about you in a room, talking about the environment in a room, I remember that was the focus that we had. But in fact, even then, we never explored it. But you were exploring the broad brush of the whole world, which, what do you say? I didn't want to just be right. I wish there was some changes happening in the right direction. We've been talking about this stuff for so long. I think back how long we've been talking about the environment and solutions that could be implemented. Canada seems to be, and I don't know if it's an illusion or not, seems to be much more responsive in the legislative areas than the United States, in my mind, about the big environment. What do you see legislative-wise? Canada protecting better than the United States? And how are they doing with their laws on stuff?
Well, I tell you, for a long time, Canada was a global leader in terms of action on environment. And then, we had other players step up and do great things as well. And we are working very hard to do our best in many areas. And right now, of course, we have the next climate summit coming up in Glasgow in November. And so we're going to, we have pledged to hold to the Paris agreements and so on and so forth. And so we also have had one of the strongest national environmental networks in the world. I found this out from attending a lot of United Nations conferences. Through my work with the Canadian Environmental Network, I had the opportunity to attend 5 different UN conferences called the World Urban Forum. They're held every 2 years. And we were first in Canada, then China, then Brazil, then Colombia, and finally at an even larger conference called Habitat 3 that was held in Quito, Ecuador in 2016. And when I went there, I'd make these presentations and people from many different countries and, having many different job titles and so on would attend the sessions. And they were always amazed at what we were doing with our Canadian Environmental Network. And so you asked about legislation and so on. Our environmental network for over 3 decades, getting well long into 4 decades now, worked very closely with the federal government. In fact, it was the federal government and the environmental network together, or environmental groups together, that formed the network back in the late 70s, somewhere in the 70s. I got involved in 88. And anyway, so we, members of our environmental groups, are often invited to the table when federal consultations are happening with Environment Canada or Health Canada. They'll set up the consultation. Members of our groups will be brought to wherever the meeting is. Sometimes it's local, but sometimes it's in Ottawa, sometimes maybe Toronto. And you'd have members of industry at the table as well as government people. You'd have a lot of people from the federal government, but sometimes provincial or municipal people at the table as well. And this is where Canada really got a huge lead. And when I checked in with other people around the world, including the Scandinavians, there was nobody that had a network working on the level that we have worked. But in terms of, are we protecting things better than the US? We try to keep a lot of continuity. And again, this is where the environmental movement comes in. When you have, we have here conservative government and liberals, those are the dominant ones. Then we have the New Democratic Party as well, whereas in the US, what is our conservative government corresponds to your Republican, and the Democrats corresponds to our liberals. But so anyway, when, because of the work that we did, and our groups would still be together working, when the government would change, conservatives bringing in, not necessarily always, but usually a lot of concentration on fiscal and maybe rolling back some of the gains that had been made in environment, we would be there, doing our thing to push it along. And so we did lose a lot of ground under Stephen Harper. He did a lot of damage, really, to civil society. And we're still trying to gain a lot of that ground back. And, more in more recent governments in the US, the way the Environmental Protection Agency always reflects what the lead is with the Republicans or the Democrats.
Let me interrupt a moment. Because Americans, you hear the name Stephen Harper, you think, who's that guy, a musician? He was your prime minister, was he not?
Yes, he was a conservative prime minister, and now our prime minister is Justin Trudeau, who's a liberal prime minister.
So in that period when Harper was there, what kind of areas did you see? I mean, was it allowing more pollution, or was it not passing legislation about, any examples? Because when I talk about what's going on, I see the world and climate change different than some, in that I don't think there's enough time to solve it all. And, the end of the story in the movie, and everyone lived happily ever after. I think we have gone too far. And so we have to stop the bad things, do the good things, and find out and plan how we cope with the things we've done, and how to, I almost think of it like damage control. How can one deny that if you're a climate change denier and you see the half of the United States is now bone dry, something's going on. Man must have had something to do with it. So like when you talk about fiscal, and maybe I'm ranting a little, but that's what I'm talking about. Because I see resistance from industry because of that fiscal element. to resist changes in law. I just
Mhm.
heard from someone, I don't know, hearsay, that Bayer, which was Monsanto, Bayer bought Monsanto, that they just took Roundup off the market. I thought, what? Glyphosate's off the market? Is that, have you heard that one too?
It's about time.
It's like,
Um,
wow.
yeah. Well, okay. So you have raised many things here. So let me talk first about the value of industry. I'm a huge advocate of the value of industry at the table. And this comes from over 3 decades of my own work
Right.
at consultations here in my own province, but in particular at national consultations, where there are always industry players present. And they can be from the chemical industries. A lot of them are from the petroleum industries and electricity and forests and all different kinds of representation, depending on what we're talking about. And industry, more than ever, has to be part of the solution. And whereas it used to be that people would just easily think of industry as the bad guys. We need to be viewing industry in terms of partnership and encouraging industry, be it large industry or be it smaller players, to do their best to leap right into what we need today. So yes, we have gone too far in terms of bringing the planet to where it is right now. We should not be in the state and have the problems that we have right now, but we do. Have we gone to the point of no return? I think not. I think that around the world, millions and millions of people are waking up. They're starting to tweak their priorities or come to new understandings about what's important in the world. I think we're moving away from such a high degree of materialism and the need to prove ourselves by owning stuff, and approaching a more experiential life and valuing people and family and ordinary values like that more, which is going to help. And so we need industry to step up because we can't make the changes without them. And a lot of people think, well, if government would just regulate industry, we wouldn't have all these problems. Well, it doesn't work like that. Industry has a lot of control. Government makes the legislation. It takes time to decide what your policies are and then get the legislation in place and get it passed through your houses of government and then, written out and having it taking place. And so what has defined industry up until now is they always want to be feeling that they're on a level playing field. So they don't want to do anything that's more arduous or cost more money for them than the next industry is doing. That's the level playing field. But right now, we need industry leaders that are ready to leap. They're ready to step out ahead and do what needs to be done. They need to be also meeting with their stakeholders because there are shareholders. I mean, there are a lot of shareholders who are willing to possibly not earn so much money if better things can be done for the planet. And people do invest money in buying goods and services that are greener these days. And shareholders there needs to be a systems change where it's not just cool for people to industry to earn money however they can, as long as they're serving the needs of their shareholders and making money with the shareholders. So there are systems changes that need to be made across the board. And we need really enlightened and very energetic and courageous business leaders to be part of that systems change.
So is that happening in Canada? But in the United States, I'm watching. I live in Little Maui, and although you haven't been here recently, you probably can echo. They had burning of sugarcane and all kinds of issues about people's health from the sugarcane burning and the chemicals in there and all kinds of stuff. And you were around in some of these fights. It's still going on. We have a group came in, bought 50 something thousand acres, and they're planting it in green, but they're not using the highest and best method. They talk about what they're doing, and it's better than doing nothing. It's away from sugarcane, but it's still not ideal. And yet to get legislation about that and things to help small farmers, there's so many different aspects of stuff. I still feel a tremendous resistance from the big guys, from even bigger than someone who comes and buys that there are huge pressures that still don't do things the right way. And in the United States, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it amazes me. Every time I go to Costco, I don't know how it is in Canada, but there are more and more things that are organic. It's like they're listening to the small and mighty few. And now, I don't know how the numbers read, but sure seems like there's more good solutions that are coming and being available to people on product level. So the market has picked up for people that cost more but are better quality and safer for the environment. So I'm sure that some of the stockholders of large corporations do get involved. But that's why I talk about the big E and the little e, because the legislation I'm talking about is there used to be a company called I forgot. Look at that. Maybe it was Monsanto. Will they make carpets years ago?
Not to my knowledge. It's possible, but not to my knowledge.
The first thing I remember about environment and products was there was a company that was making carpets that didn't off gas. This guy named Ray Anderson, I believe.
That's right. Yes, I've heard him speak. He spoke here in Halifax.
Now, the company that he had, again, if I say Monsanto, it was some kind of industry like that. And then when I heard Monsanto was in seeds, that was like, wow, the carpet guys. But it was some company. It's really interesting because it's always, when you take a look at that stuff, that was when that's how I thought of you, because of your sensitivity to things in the environment, that the legislation to be able to get things removed from the carpet. So when it goes into someone's house, the off-gassing from the carpet or the thing under it wouldn't create other illnesses. That's how I remember you originally when I thought about environment. So I'm happy to hear that you've been speaking about the big stuff also. But where does rubber meet the road? I don't know if that's funny to say, but I guess there's talk about it and then there's the doing of it. It's like a dream is just a dream until you put little feet on it. And that dream plus action creates a something. I talk about my organization as Dream Makers. I've been talking for 30 years, but how much of that has stuck to the ribs of the Maui government or the people? And the world is kind of caught up to our ideas, but I'm saying, how effective are we? Are we getting through? What do you?
Well, first of all, you say, I'm on Little Maui. Well, Little Maui is very important. Any kind of small area is very important because that's where the work gets done. And municipalities, small governments, are where the work really gets done. That's where the rubber hits the road. So what happens in cities and what happens in towns, and so at the level of Maui, even though you have federal influence and stuff like that, it's your local governments that you're involved with a lot. And yeah, I've not been back over since 2019. That's not that long ago, but for somebody like myself who likes to come every year, it's a long time. But at any rate, one of my friends just sent me last week an article from the Maui News about discussions within Maui County Council about reducing pesticide and fertilizer usage on the island. And that was very exciting for me to read. And it's really a step in the right direction. And so, when you reduce pesticides and fertilizers, you're benefiting the air, the soil, the groundwater, and the ocean water. And so this is one of the areas where Maui was always very behind. And so I was thrilled to find out that you're getting started in that direction. And as the years go by, I hope, this is the discussion is to make those changes on
Just so
Maui County property.
Well, that specifically in Maui thing that you're talking about, I want to say is the tail wagging the dog. There's been a very strong environmental movement on Maui this whole time, led by lots of outspoken people in politics. This present council is way heavily weighted toward responsible people, environmentally sensitive. We have, without naming names, a very heavy, strong environmental commitment to here. And so you're going to see a lot of things happening here. I'm working with a guy from Montana about a thing called Regenitech. They take algae, they grow algae, and they process it, and it becomes biofuel to run a jet engine that takes green waste and reduces it into biochar. And as it heats up, they siphon off different things that then become reintroduced as phytoceuticals, and they have fantastic growth. They're regenerating the soil. That's a project we're working on here.
Well, yes. And then when so Maui Council has changed to this wonderful composition that it is now, because now is the time for these things to be happening. And what is happening there is happening in many other jurisdictions all over the world. And so obviously when I'm online, I'm following many environmentally oriented things. And almost every day I'm reading about some new technology. Last week, I was reading about someone in France who has made an ocean-going vessel that eats up the plastic in the ocean.
Yeah.
So it takes the plastic on board and then sorts it out. And then the plastic can be taken and used for various recycling things. So that's just one vessel right now. But he has plans for a vessel for 400 vessel fleet, which would take tons and tons, of plastics out. I was just reading this morning about a little beach bot, I think it's called beach bot or something. It's a tiny little thing, almost like even smaller than a smart car, that can go along beaches and pick up stuff that's there, including cigarette butts, which are the most littered thing on the planet.
Like a mobile Roomba, those things that go along in your room and eat up all the stuff. So this is one that cigarette butts are unbelievable, aren't they? When you talk cigarette butts.
Yeah. But so I want to make the point about deep ecology. So the boats, this bot thing that they're talking about, that sounds really wonderful, and I'm excited about that. But we need to be going for the deeper solution. So the deeper solution is, of course, the behavioral change, so that everybody understands. There are still people who throw cigarette butts out despite all of the education that's been done about it, or they'll throw out, coffee cups or whatever. So we need to be getting deeper and deeper into the behavioral things. And I think that we're making a lot of advancement in that regard in schools, because environment is being emphasized so much in schools. And there are students, high school students in their various projects who are coming up with wonderful inventions. And so when we get all of this together, it starts to make a formidable force, and we're developing more and more will to be living in balance on the earth. And our Indigenous people haven't forgotten that, you know, and so taking the lead from Indigenous people and working with Indigenous people is important. Before we lose the point, I'd like to speak about what you were mentioning about the group that has come in and bought many thousands of hectares or acres, as you call it, on the Central Plain there. Yes, all of the years that I was in Maui, up until recently, there was cane burning. And I experienced the fallout and spoke about it in many different venues there. And when the cane burning finally stopped, then we all started getting excited about what could be planted there in the Central Valley. So I was reading up on the group Maui Pono.
Maui Pono, right?
That is taking the lead, and I see that they're making some mistakes, but B, they are doing a lot of things right, and they seem to have some very good ideas. I would say, I don't know what the total amount of your acres are there, but you know what we had talked about as soon as the cane, or even before the cane burning stopped, was local groups being able to get together and do some of what Maui Pono is doing. So I think what Maui Pono is doing is good. The part that's not ideal, that needs to be tweaked, and we need to go deeper, is to have the work being generated on Maui, not out of Maui and then brought in, because then the profits go out too. But I mean, still, it's a good start. But with the acreage that is remaining, what would be really good would be to have public dialogue. And dialogue can take a while. It's not like you just have one or two conversations with people from various parts of the island and work things out, but public dialogue to figure out how local groups can get involved in working with the rest of what's there, so that Maui benefits and so that the profits also remain. And then before we go on to another subject, I'd also like to say something about Costco and big box stores. You were saying that when you go into Costco, and I know a lot of people on Maui shop at Costco, yes, there's more and more organics going. I personally do not have a Costco membership. And one of the things that I do not like about the big box stores, and it's going to have to be turned around, is that they're selling too many things in bulk. So let's say you wanted to just buy some hand cream or something like that. You know, they'll have a grouping of 3, or if it's mouthwash, or, you know, if it's vitamins, whatever it is, instead of just buying the one, they have you buying these huge quantities. And if it's tuna fish or something, then you'll eat those quantities. But with these other things, I just look at them and I picture them in people's cabinets. And I think to myself, I wonder how much of that stuff gets thrown out, because you just can't use it all. It's not even good to buy something that you're not using for 3 years.
That might be a separate subject, because Costco is responsive. I mean, I've watched them as they have products in that are doing what you're saying. There could be that some of those things are wasted, but they keep redoing. I'm amazed at how, maybe it's just locally, they have really been responsive. They have a lot of local products. They don't have the huge quantities like you're talking about. They for families, you know, interesting.
But I would ask, I mean, I'm using that as an example because, you know, that's a store that everybody is familiar with here and there and everywhere. But I would ask retailers, and I would ask people who are in the business of having stores and buying things, not to be making people buy things in bulk unless they need to or choose to, but don't be making the sales in terms of, making people buy more things than they need. They do the same thing in clothing stores. Buy one, get one 50% off. Well, who needs two of everything? You just end up with more things than you need. And we as human beings have to reduce our consumption. It's paramount.
I think so, but I also, when I hear that, I know that the individual thing makes more waste. I mean, it's all so interwoven. You win on this hand and you lose on that hand. It's like, yes, then you have individual cups inside. You have 25 little individual servings that get sold instead of one big one. And so if you're a family, you're buying I hear what we're saying. Oh, what I didn't want to lose was before we got to Costco, when we were talking about like the Maui Pono and the little farmers on Maui. Maui Pono is making available land for little farmers on Maui. It is very unclear about how that's going to work out. And there are things that I'm not allowed to publicly talk about that are happening in an even bigger way in that regard. But for example, when we talk about the large acreage, when you see a bed that's 36 inches wide, let's say, that's a standard bed for farming, and then next to it is another one and another one and another one, and between them is just a little so you can walk between them. In commercial farming, you got the 36-inch wide bed, then you have 10 feet for a tractor to get through. And in that area, there's nothing growing. So the idea of growing your own regenerative soil through growing, let's say, sun hemp or things that can rebuild nitrogen into, that's the stuff that's not happening. So by the time they get to doing that kind of stuff, and now you talk about the fertilizer, trying to reduce the fertilizer. Somehow I'm hoping it would all work together, but here, Maui Pono, for example, if that law passed, might be forced to do that thing that they could be doing voluntarily now. So it's a funny balance. Like you say, do you pass the law or do you ask the industry to step up by themselves? And somehow, it's like, what do you do? Do you legislate or do you let the industry do the solution? That's such a big thing to contemplate.
Well, like I said, you do legislate. Yes, you do have to legislate. However, because we're in the situation that we are on the planet right now, we need to go beyond the old way of doing things. So we need industry leaders that are willing to stick their necks out and go ahead of the flock and take some losses if they need to, work together with their shareholders and get support for being as green as they can be, and other people will follow along behind. And then if you make these changes and people notice and they start buying your goods or buying your services because of what you're doing, it ends up paying. So I just think that we're at a very exciting time on the planet. It's quite a cliffhanger, and but if we all get on board, which we need to do, and do the things that we can do a lot in our own homes, the way we live our lives, the fewer necessities that we have to be buying all the time, and then making those that we do buy to be green, to have fewer chemicals in them. Every little bit that anyone does helps out, and some people might feel that, oh, they're only one little person and they can't do anything and they feel so helpless. But every small thing that any individual does is so important. And I was thinking also about people growing food in their own backyards. I mean, that's catching on everywhere, and I know that it is in Maui. And I was just talking to some friends last week who were saying that there are some projects undergoing to give people some small financial assistance to help with starting to grow their own vegetables in their own backyards. So that helps too. Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of major projects that teaching people how to be their own backyard farmers and helping them starting their gardens. That there's Food Security Hawaii, and there's a farmers union here doing projects of education. It's happening.
It is happening, and it's exciting.
It's that's where I was talking about originally, about we can do all that stuff. I don't think I'm a pessimist. I think I'm being realistic. If I can't get someone to help their neighbor, how am I going to get them to save the planet? I mean, if we can't do the little basic things in life to help some, a lot of the problems happen because we've all created them, whether they're climate or social. So I don't have as much faith that everyone will lighten up before the fires are burning all around us and we say, we got to stop the fire. So that's why I talk the way I do. I want to do the right thing, and I want us all to continue because, like you said very clearly, all of us doing it is what's going to make the difference. We all have to be doing it. But I don't know. I don't know how to if this stuff that's going on now in our world isn't shaking up industry to realize that short-term profit that you may think you're making now is not going. It is not the way of the future.
No,
it's going to cost you way more. And not only that, is it good to have all the gold and have everything around you die? It's like it's a funny balance between socialism and capitalism and all how politics and the way people are. It's just we are at an exciting and dynamic time. I hope that you're right. I hope that the young people, I say that as an old people. I've been talking about this stuff for a long time also. And this gray, I've earned this gray, although I'm 70, I could hide it and stuff, but I have are we a little too late? Or are you still believe that 400 ships picking up plastic in the ocean is going to do enough? I say we have to do that, and we have to do all the right things to make it better, but yet find a way of coping. I mean, here on Maui, when they build something on the water, and it's like, we know that the sea level is going to rise in the next decade, X feet.
I know.
And yet we're building and having people pay $45 million for this property on the water. Why don't you build a boat ramp? And I don't really get. This is what I'm wondering about.
No. I know.
How do you perceive that stuff? That's like nuts.
Well, I mean, I live in Nova Scotia, it's a peninsula. We're almost completely surrounded by water. And I see the same thing. And I think to myself, I mean, there are some places where there are little cottages on cliffs down in the Bay of Fundy, for instance, and people are selling those things. And, they're asking inflated prices because people are buying anything, anywhere to get out of the cities right now. And I'm thinking, why would somebody even think of buying this? I mean, it's practically ready to go over the cliff right now, but at any rate, those things happen. But in terms of the example I was giving about the French person who's working on the plastics. That's just one example. You know, his company and his fleet of 400 vessels wouldn't be the only thing.
Oh,
but hey, 400 vessels from one company, that's pretty darn good. And then other people can be doing it. Then in the meantime, we're working away trying to get rid of plastics. And I was at the federal table 2 years ago here in Canada when our policies on plastics were rolled out, and some wonderful things, were happening to deal with the plastic problem. Well, unfortunately, the pandemic has really set our advancements in containing plastic way back. But still, we still have the plans there, and I mean, all our big grocery stores here now, there are no plastic bags anymore. You take your cloth bags. Maybe you've already done that on Maui too. But that's just,
we don't have any more plastic. We strictly have paper or carry your own.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. That's happening all over the place. I remember driving by the landfill in Maui, and there'd just be these plastic bags blowing in the wind, hanging off the trees, right?
Still.
And and here's another. We have this initiative here in Halifax, where I live, and I think it's happening in quite a few other places too, which is 2 times a year we have this thing like throw your treasures to the curb. So something that you don't want that is still workable and really good, you just put it out at the curb, and everybody drives around and gets whatever they need. And the reason to start that was to divert things from landfills. So instead of your much loved and much used sofa that you're replacing, instead of it going to the landfill, it could end up in somebody's cottage, And so all of these small initiatives help. And getting back to our discussion about backyard gardening, here, right in the city where I live, my neighbors behind me and my neighbors beside me, they're both very much urban gardeners. I mean, they've got all kinds of vegetables coming, even garlic, berries, all and then all your regular stuff. Just about everybody I know at least has fresh herbs. Now in Maui, you're living in summertime all the time, so you can have these things here. But here, you have to make an effort to make sure you do this kind of thing in the summer. But also with that community gardening, it makes me think about the strength that's happening in community. People are craving community. People are getting back to community. They're learning again how to be more connected and more caring of their neighbors. And this I see very much here where I live, and I see it in other areas that I go as well. And it's even discussed at the international conferences, that I go to. So it's little by little in every single nook in the entire planet. And that's how it's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. Well.
And even if we don't get to eat the whole elephant, we sure want to try. What do you think? I've been going all over the map here. When you came here to talk to me, is it something that it may be this, but what's important to Sheila Cole now in these exciting times? What do you think is a really important message that you would like to be able to deliver to people?
Oh, well, I really want to see consumption reduced, absolutely. Gee, it's interesting that you asked me this. I feel like a kid in a candy shop.
Well,
I can say whatever I want. I've done a lot of work on chemicals management, and we have way too many synthetic chemicals in the world. And I would like to see the use of those synthetic chemicals dramatically reduced. I would like to see people catch themselves when they're going into fear and bring themselves out into confidence and into love, and to be raising their vibration. Because in order to get all of this work done that needs to be done, we have to recognize what the problems are, but say, we can do it. Let's just get in there and do the work that needs to be done. Let's cooperate, and let's keep our energy very, very high. Let's take good care of ourselves, and let's take good care of the other people in our community. And that's the way we all come to the table, one great big table, and work together.
Right? We now have a table with so many people at the table. I keep going and using the example of, we're going wide instead of deep. We're being forced to change the nature of the labor force, to change the way we grow things. Like when you talk about a neighbor on this side and that side growing berries and having herbs, but I don't see people yet being able to be closer to self-sustainable. I'm seeing pockets of it happening, but the masses of people, I guess that's where education happens, but it needs to start happening, or we're just, like I say, we're building on the ocean, right on the ocean front, when we shouldn't. When you put all of it together, are we gonna sink or swim as a world? We gotta keep on trying to swim, but somehow knocks themselves into, why is a real estate community? I still am just shocked when I think about that one. You're selling properties for millions of dollars and condos on Maui for millions of dollars, and you know that these properties are going to be going underwater. You don't have enough housing for the local people. You keep growing more of that vacation rental stuff that is just going into the ocean. By what we know now, why aren't those things heard?
Yeah, well, these are such important issues, and it just doesn't seem to make any sense at all. Again, I come back to the dialogue. There needs to be dialogue that involves everybody. The people who are just regular people living, having a job, renting, whatever. The indigenous Hawaiian people who have knowledge that they've been carrying for thousands of years, which is fabulous, beautiful knowledge, and they lived in balance with the earth all these years. You need small business, industry people, and so on, taking time to talk. And you talk about Maui. This is what we're faced with here. Are we going to keep on, making more vacation rentals and just let people come willy-nilly, thousands and more plane loads full of people, when we can't, accommodate them, and our beautiful island is, carrying this load.
Right. We've run out of rental cars, and stay in a store and wait an hour. It's changing everything.
Yeah, and it's so the beautiful value and worth of daily life is being dramatically eroded, and you can't keep going that way. It's just ridiculous. Nobody is happy with that. So you have to figure out how to stop doing that. So then, whatever, I'm not going to say what has to be done, but you figure out what the problems are, then prioritize what needs to be done first. And, we speak about legislation. Maybe there has to be, of course, legislation here. We're not allowed to change the waterfront. people still try to do it, and I think there's some people who get away with it. That means to like put infill there, and then maybe make your property a little bit bigger, or put infill there and then make a dock or something like that. Our legislation reads that you're not supposed to be allowed to do that. Well, then also I think that we're developing legislation where you can't build, too close. Fresh housing cannot go too close, and there have to be all of these various things about how it's built and everything that goes into the building before it happens.
And you and I laugh anyway, because I'm a pessimist. Too little, too late. Why would these people want to build it so close? Because they're driven by self, money, selfish. And how are we going to save a world unless we flip the attitudes? And I can dream of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, things get done. Here we have a lot of tidal action. Over on the Bay of Fundy side, we have the highest tides in the world.
Wow.
Here in here in Halifax, where I live, we just have regular tides, like you have in Maui. But at any rate, there's land erosion everywhere on the planet right now, and tides are coming further up onto the land now. And so we have had to replace seawalls in various places, and we replaced them not just where they had been eroded from a hurricane or something, but we replaced them to make them higher, because we know that sea rise is happening. So I'm sure that some of those things are considered in Maui too, but it seems like it's because it's a small island, and because things have happened so quickly there, it's like things are out of control a bit. And I'm sure that everybody is doing their best to, but there needs to be more discussion and solutions that come from the ground up, not from the top down, but from the ground up, involving all of the local people who live there. And there's going to have to be some limit to growth, and limit to the number of people who can visit at any given time, etc.
Well, we are in the middle of all that discussion and action now. I mean, there was a moratorium passed by the council about hotels for a couple of years, no growth, and the mayor vetoed it. And see those eyes? So it's like, I get it. It's like a very strange bunch of bedfellows here. It's like, well, are you kidding me? Where he says, oh, please, airlines, stop people from coming in. And the governor says, we can't do that. We can't halt interstate transportation. So we know we're getting overcrowded, yet we're still building.
My goodness. Oh. Well,
see, they're building a Hilton. That was the area on South Kihei Road. If there was a rain, we had a lake. There was always a lake across Kihei Road. So why are they not just building a boat marina Hilton? Instead, they're building a Hilton like a normal Hilton. And it's just great. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you see, so if there's not legislation in place now, then that has to be discussed so that there can be legislation, so that you can say, yeah, welcome, come to Maui, but, not however many flights there are a day. I don't know, but everybody I know there is telling me how the place is absolutely overrun right now. And everybody's just so worried about it.
Well, and more than that, it's more than worried about it. How do you stop it? It's like when you go to a rental car company. Oh, sorry, we're booked until the end of August with our rental cars. What? So what do we here locally do? It's a very, very strange phenomenon, and it's it's hard to stop. It just keeps happening. Or now people can come here if they've been vaccinated, but if they're not, they go into quarantine. And if they go into quarantine and if someone has COVID, then their whole group has to be isolated. And there's nowhere to do it. Then what about a hospital that can get overrun? We are a different experience, and yet somehow.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that funny? I know it's very funny. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, well, we have similar problems here too. I mean, we're not having all the people visiting like you are, but we're having rental issues and affordable housing issues. And somebody was telling me just the other day that we here have a shortage of rental cars too. There's apparently a worldwide shortage of rental cars. And so, maybe it's a supply chain thing as well.
When the pandemic was happening and everything got cut off, next to the airport, there were thousands and thousands of rental cars lined up.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the rental car companies were forced to move them off or sell them. And then things started ramping up.
That's what happened.
And there's not enough rental cars.
Oh, my goodness.
And so then that becomes a rogue industry. Everyone's renting out their extra car or buying cars and renting them out for incredible amounts per day. And then there's a black market on that. And then people are cutting out catalytic converters and selling them because there's fancy things in that. It's like a Wild West here now.
Well, I guess it's nervous laughter on my part, because I mean, I care so deeply for Maui. I mean, it's my second home, and it's not funny. It's ridiculous. So, but I mean, but these are cookie cutter problems that are the same problems that are being that are happening in other parts of the globe too, and we consume ourselves to death. Right now, in Maui's case, the consuming to death has to do with tourism, So obviously you can't it can't continue like that. There have to be checks and balances. And if they aren't in place now, then somebody has to figure out how to get them in place. And
they sure do. We're 7,000 or 8,000 living units short for people who live here. The average house is $1 million on Maui.
I know.
How many people we know here that can afford to buy a house?
Oh, I know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I hope going forward that Native Hawaiians will have an increasingly robust participation in the decision making, and that there will be more reclamation of land that has been degraded through bad farming methods or through housing and buildings. Eventually some of the things that have been built will have to come down. It would be wonderful to see reforestation of the slopes of Haleakala. Is it still possible to grow koa and sandalwood there like used to be there in the past?
That's very funny you say that. That in 1995, a few years ago, I talked about reforestation here because of global conference about taking a barren wasteland, turning it into a fully biodiverse rainforest. It isn't that these ideas haven't been around and examples of great things, I think that's why I sound pessimistic even as I'm listening. I want to keep fighting, but we have to wake some people up to how far down the road we are.
I think people know we're at the end of the road. I think that's something that just about everybody agrees on. And, so this is when we have to dig in. I know that there there are some reforestation initiatives happening on Maui. And, maybe they can happen even to a greater degree. I know that there's a lot of concentration on water issues and management of water there. And
We don't have enough water.
There's so much potential for, reconstituting the paradise that has existed there. It's a big challenge, but it's something that can be done, and I know a lot of people are interested in participating in that.
Funny,
And,
you're talking about regenerating the soil, having enough water. Those are the areas that I concentrate on. But like I say, I'm waiting for someone to really hear it and really do it. Someone the other day said to me, "What are we going to do about water?" Take water from the air. These things are not known. We know them all. We know how to take a barren piece of land and turn it into a rainforest. We're not doing it. We're doing exactly opposite. We're cutting down rainforests still. And you hear, we on a global level, I just don't know.
okay. Well, there's another good thing I can mention, and a lot of people will have caught up with this story, that there was a billionaire who bought hundreds of thousands of acres in the Amazon specifically to have it protected. And there are nature trust organizations in Maui, here, and many other places in the world that are, getting land to keep it protected and so on. And I would hope that more and more of that would be done. But we're really going to have to concentrate a lot on regeneration, and every little patch that can be regenerated is worth it. And, when you're growing things, obviously trees are the largest ones, and it's obvious the benefit that trees can bring. You have to keep the diversity in there. So you were speaking about, regenerating an actual original forest. So you're not just planting one tree species, because that's not a strong system. So every area that can be reclaimed, whether it's grassland, whether it's a bog, whatever it is, all of these systems that get something back to the natural ecosystem that it was, is the direction that we need to be going in. And there's been a tremendous amount of degradation of tree and other species on Maui. I know that from because I've traveled extensively in every nook and cranny of the island. And so we want to get back to some of the original species that can live well on dry sides of the island. Like, there's a different kinds of species that would grow on the arid side of the island than the ones that grow, in the rainforest side.
This is what's going to drive this. We'll see if it's in our lifetime, Sheila. I don't mean to be constantly going back to it, but you said it originally. It's driven by the industry with the money and the people with the money. Some billionaire buys 100,000 acres to save it, and right next door, someone's lighting a match and clearing the land because they have different things. So it's just such a hodgepodge. It's
well, from what I read about the Maui Pono project, they've done quite a good job of figuring out how to combine various needs. It's my understanding that they are reducing chemical use, and they talked about something, I hadn't heard that term before, but at any rate, it's allowing certain weeds to grow in their among the fruit trees, because the root structures help to hold water in the soil, and therefore you don't need to use so much water for irrigation. I know they've provided for pasture land there for grass-fed cattle production and so on. So they're doing a lot of things, even though it's not ideal, and even though it's not, small groups from Maui owning all that land. I think that it's a really, really worthy and good beginning.
I hope so too, because the big question around here is when they start to actually get yield, will that yield serve the local community, or will it be sold to somewhere else? And it's an interesting combination of factors, all of it, like you say.
Yeah, well, and to have the local community insisting on, consistent and continuous conversation with the people who are running that project is part of the key. To have people telling them on a daily basis,
And
we
they're
want
reaching
that
out.
yield. We want that yield on this island. You must make that yield stay on this island, and holding them accountable. Yeah.
Well, but consider that they're owned by a pension plan from Canada.
That's one of the partners. I read about that today.
And they own a big farming thing in California, and they were farming there. And then what ended up happening was their biggest resources that they were getting to control was the water. And we had that issue here about the water and what it takes to be growing that kind of amount of stuff. So it's really interesting. It's a giant web.
Well, and this project is only one of. I saw. It wasn't an org chart, but it showed all the many different huge projects that are owned by this one conglomerate, and they have a lot of things going on. And there were at least 20 that I remember just from glancing at it today. It was interesting that someone had posted on Facebook this morning the story about the Maui Pono project, and I read as much of it as I could. And at first I thought, oh my God, this is like fantastic, and then I read more and more and more, and got deeper and deeper into.
Well, you brought up
the whole
example
thing.
today. Look at that. You own 20 things, and you expect to have them all work together. And then one group over here says, we want the yield from that to be delivered locally. It's hard to deal with a local need and a global need. It's like a.
That's right. But here's where we're starting anew in so many different ways, because we're waking up to our own personal sovereignty and to our own personal power that we have to create a future that's in balance with nature, in balance with each other, and in balance with nature. And so the balance in this case is for the local people to continue to have interaction with and input that sticks with this particular project, because this project purports to be doing all of these progressive things, and the local people it's their right to hold them to be the best example that they can be, not to be halfway there or a third there. And I think that they're way more than halfway there, but they do need to continue to be held accountable.
It's going to be a very interesting thing as it unravels, because part of the deal was they have to be profitable by X time, and they're extending an extraordinary amount of money.
Yeah. And I understand that they bought irrigation equipment that's specific and appropriate for California, but not for the Central Valley and Maui. These are mistakes, and these are things that people have to learn from. But again, it reinforces what I'm saying, is that you need local people who live there, and especially the Native Hawaiians who understand the land and understand the history, to be able to decide what is going to be best and what should be done first. And I know that Maui Pono has sourced many of their things locally, but not to the extent that would be ideal, let's say.
That's another thing to put on here. The Native Hawaiians and their desire to say, why should we do this? Let them fail, then we take over. Because there's still the idea of having an independent Hawaiian nation. So the dramas that go together, to put things together, if we were writing a movie, we would have all the good elements here.
Yes, but is it possible to take some of the land that's remaining? They don't own all of the land, right? Are there
when you say they, who could take this? Someone with money. If there was someone with money, there are people here that have land. I did an interview of a farmer this week on this feasibility project I was talking about. And people are approaching him all the time. I have land. If you know anyone that can help me, they want him to set up their land. But he's overwhelmed with his projects that he's doing. So there's not enough people to be able to do the things, even if there is the land.
Oh boy. Yikes.
It's an interesting mix. I mean, and that's why it's very funny. I think of you and I, or maybe not, but we sit in our ivory tower, but getting this to happen physically is like trying to move a mountain with a spoon.
I don't sit in my ivory tower. I've been in the trenches.
Well, I'm in my ivory tower in the sense that the things that we talk about that people should be doing, and it's really a workout. Just like I said, the council passed this moratorium to stop anyone from adding any more building things in the travel industry for 2 years while we look at what's happening. And the mayor vetoed it. Well, there are too many things in process, be too expensive to stop. Again,
was that the current mayor with this very progressive council that you're telling me about?
I am talking about, yes, in the last couple of weeks. So it's a very complicated kind of world we have here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to your credit, Jason, I don't see you as sitting in your ivory tower. I think that you have been very thoughtful and very engaged with what's happening in Maui for as long as I've known you.
That's right. I wonder. There was a guy named Serge King who taught.
Yes, I know who you mean. Yeah.
And his last little rule of his rules is effectiveness is the measure of truth. And when I hear that, I think it's like, so how good am I? What results do we get? And I'm hoping that the wave that I'm setting in motion is doing something, because it's not happening fast enough for my taste. So
no,
that's
well, you are a communicator and you have a huge body of work in terms of the social and cultural history, the recent social and cultural history of Maui, dating back to when you began to do your radio and television work. Wow. And
so God, that's some years already.
Yeah, and that's very important. And so you've interviewed so many different people over the years, and engaged with people on ideas and progress and what needs to be done. And that's discourse. That you're doing the kind of discourse that we're talking about.
When I pulled out of running for a political office and chose talking about the things, I think that was an important crossroads. And I question sometimes what I think about, because of the fact that I don't know how effective I've been. I don't know if I would have been more effective in a political seat or not, but I think of that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Mhm.
You know, I keep talking and running this show, and now we're now a what do we call it? An extended play, which is good. That means you'll be on more than 1 week. We're going to continue this interview into a second show. It really is true. When this subject just lights me up, I question I question my effectiveness over the years. And I appreciate I've been speaking about it, but I'm just hoping that the young people at 70, and no matter if I live another 20 years, I'll be, it's the young people that have to put the feet on the ground, the boots on the ground to do this, to carry
Well,
these ideas.
yeah, I mentioned the young people earlier in terms of some of the excellent project work that they're doing in their high school studies. I'm very much interested in total communication, from young people way up to the elders, and so the elders are holding so much knowledge and so much experience, and we need to retain that, and we need to have that engaged all the way down the line. So while it's exciting that we have youth who are well educated and very, very keen on rebuilding, a fabulous world, it's not their responsibility totally. We are encouraged by them. They are coming forward, but they have other people all the way up the line to the eldest of the eldest to reach to and to work in cooperation with. It's very much a group thing. It's the extended family of humankind.
And I like to think to take the wisdom of the old and the traditional and marry them with the technical from now. Together, there's our chance for solutions.
That's right.
Throw out the wisdom and use it with the new technological advances.
Mm-hmm.
God willing, God willing, we all together will make this a better place. And I guess that's my message. It takes you out there.
Yes. Yeah, it takes
everybody,
but don't be frightened about it. I mean, just two people working together can start and build unbelievable things. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it myself. And don't ever feel that you're not enough or that you can't do anything.
Margaret Mead quote: "Don't ever feel that something can happen with just a few people, because that's how everything happens."
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for taking this time. I hope it's satisfying to you as we're doing this. I hope I'm leaving you enough room to make the points that you would like to make, because it is your commitment to doing this for all these years. That's why you're award winning, because you've been doing it, sharing and reaching out and making a difference and sharing it. Thank you for that. And thanks for gifting
you're
me
welcome.
with all these shows, and you let me yap like I do.
Well, it's a conversation more than an interview. It's a conversation. That's your style. And I think it's great fun that this is the 5th time that we've done this together. We always enjoy it. And I'm sure there's more to come.
3 decades? 3 decades. My God.
Yeah.
I've been on you a long time already here. It's amazing.
That's right. Yeah. There's history going on.
Well, we could go on and I could keep talking about this. Thank you for joining me here, Sheila.
Oh, you're so welcome, Jason. Anytime. It's my pleasure.
And you're way ahead of us, so appreciate that you're accommodating your schedule way into the evening. for me for this. And
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. My energy is good in the evening, so this works fine with me. And there's more to say. I mean, I could go into some stories that I would love to tell, but perhaps we'll leave that for another
well,
time. I'll make a note, and we'll
why don't you tell one? We're already in the second show. Let's get
okay. All right. Okay. Well, so, I was saying, don't ever think that you're not enough or that you can't do anything, and that it only takes yourself and one other person. Yeah, I mean, you can be the instigator, so you're the first one, and then you get one other person who's interested, and you start doing something. So here in Halifax, we were one of the first jurisdictions in Canada to get a pesticide bylaw. So, and that's one thing we didn't talk about, Jason. We talked about how the county is doing something to look at reducing pesticides and fertilizers on county property. That is something that needs to be looked at in terms of individual homeowners as well. And it would be good if people could be putting more emphasis on growing things on their property, decorative things and so on, that are more traditional and that require less watering and that can do fine, without needing, pesticide and herbicide management. So that's another whole conversation. But at any rate, yes, we have a pesticide bylaw here. And us and a little town in Quebec were the first two jurisdictions to get them. And we later went ahead and we have a province-wide pesticide bylaw. So you can go walking out in your neighborhoods, you can go to parks, your pets can run around, your children can run on the grass, and you don't have to worry about all of the negative aspects of those things, poisoning the air, poisoning the soil and the groundwater, and runoff into lakes. So speaking of runoff into lakes, so I was one of the ones to get the work started on pesticides. So I was living on a very beautiful little lake called Chocolate Lake. And in the summertime, I would often go visiting there because it was like at my doorstep. And but I would notice that sometimes after I'd gone swimming there, I wouldn't feel well for a couple of days. And I'd look around the lake and there didn't seem to be much algae in there or anything like that. I couldn't figure out what might be wrong. But at any rate, one day I was just standing outside talking to a couple of neighbors. And we were talking about the lake, and I happened to mention that sometimes I didn't feel very well. And I know that they test the lakes all the time to see whether it's good for people to swim or not. And they test fecal chlorophyll and all this kind of thing. And I said, it seems to be fine for the tests. And then we started scratching our heads and we said, geez, I wonder if it has anything to do with pesticide runoff into the lakes. Well, that's an interesting question, we said to each other. If we want to know about that, somebody's going to have to measure it in the water and everything. And how do we get this started? So we said, well, let's see if anybody else, is interested in looking into this. So we said, well, what shall we do? Well, we'll write a letter and we'll put it in people's mailboxes and we'll invite them to a little gathering in Pam Punch's backyard. And she grew everything organically. I mean, her grass was just so delightful to walk on. It was all full of little clover leaves and everything like that. And so anyway, so we, did up the letter all official and everything. And then we went around and put it in different mailboxes. And so we had it set up that people were going to meet at 2:00 or whatever it was in Pam's backyard. So we three ladies who had started this, we were there. One of them was Pam, and the other two of us were there, and we were waiting and waiting. And finally, someone came. In that whole time that we had set aside, we only had one person who came. So you would think, well, that was a disaster. That didn't work. Nobody cares. So we won't bother doing anything. Well, as it turned out, that lady came because she was new to the neighborhood. She and her husband had just moved in, and she thought this will be a great way to meet some people. So she comes and she meets us. A month or two later, there's an election, a municipal election for city council. Her husband runs and he gets elected for our area. Meanwhile, she has taken this issue, about the pesticides, and she's interested in it now too. So then, I belong to all kinds of groups. I was still doing my work at the Ecology Action Center. I was also part of the Allergy and Environmental Health Association of Nova Scotia, and involved with the whole of the Nova Scotia Environmental Network and the whole of the Canadian Environmental Network. So, we got talking about this thing. Well, anyway, as it turned out, we eventually formed a group called Real Alternatives to Toxins in the Environment. And we just kept having this thing that I keep mentioning, which is public dialogue. How does that happen? You get groups of people together, you get the media involved, you go to your city council. We also met with members of the Legislative Assembly for the province. We met with the head of our sick children's hospital. We got everybody on board that we could think of. And so then when it came to the point, it was just a swell of interest. And when it came time for us to need to speak to city council, because if anything was going to happen, we were going to have a policy and legislation. Many of us went and spoke at city council, including myself. Then everything had to be considered by the councillors and voted on and everything. Guess who did the stick handling within the council? The husband of the woman who was the only one who came to our backyard meeting. And I ran into, this is many years ago now, it's like 15 years anyway. And I ran into him, Graham, last year. And I said, oh, gee, I haven't seen you for so many years, and I'll always remember the work that you did. And he was retired at this point, and he said, that work that I did on that issue in the city council was the most meaningful work that I did in my entire career.
How exciting.
Yeah.
So, that was the good point, which is that a little drop in the ocean can make a difference. And yes, it can.
And that's the way things get rolling. It happens all the time.
Well, I don't want to stop us, but I think I have to stop us. We'll have to do this again.
I think I'm ready. For it to stop too. I have to have some dinner here.
Well, again, we won't wait another 5, 6, 7 years to do this again. I'll let you choose when you have something. We invite you to come back and be here on our show to share with us.
Well, thank you. And who knows, the next time it might be over on Maui. I'm hoping to get back there very soon. So, but otherwise, Zoom works beautifully, doesn't it? This is really amazing.
Makes it easy for a guy who just hits the record button and says go.
Yeah.
Like this. And we have the double screen, sort of like the Larry King show, the Larry King of Maui. Larry King in Canada? Probably.
Oh my gosh, everybody in the whole world knows Larry King because he was on CNN, and you can walk in any little restaurant in the Philippines or wherever, in the background there'll be a TV playing CNN. Yeah, it's like that.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Sheila. And I hope next time I see you on Maui, that would be good. But even before, you're always welcome, and love to share anything that you think is important to me, but also to this growing audience of people all around the world that know that the neutral zone is anything but neutral. We talk about all kinds of good things.
Well, I'll tell you in closing, what neutral means to me is that it's not just one point of view. It's neutral in that it's a It's available, you know, for all kinds of ideas to be discussed and exchanged. And I think it's a wonderful show. And thank you so much, Jason, for inviting me.
My pleasure. Number 5. So now I'll remember next time. That's the 6th.
Yes. Yeah.
Sheila Cole, it's been fun talking to you, and I'm looking forward to doing this again. And audience, I'm hoping that you will listen to the show again and feel the richness of Sheila Cole. Go to her website, SheilaCole.com. She has an amazing website, can share all kinds of things with you. And little more can be said. Been a pleasure. Thank you, Sheila.
You're most welcome, Jason. Aloha.
Aloha, everyone.